Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your guy Rudy SKC, and welcome to a brand new video. The NFC Championship has concluded, and the winner of the National Football Conference this year is Fly, Eagles, Fly, guys. What a win for the Eagles over the Commanders in a game that essentially ended Jaden Daniels' amazing rookie season, and there's tons to talk about, guys. So, just on the game basis, to me, this came down to one thing, and one thing only. It was the fact that you had a team that looked like they were inexperienced, they hadn't been there, versus a team that's looked like they've been there, they're experienced, and they have that championship grit and mentality built into them. And that's what Philly had today. I would point to a ton of the mental errors, but I just got to focus on something, really basic. And it's the fact that we talked about this last week in the Lions versus Commanders recap, that was last week. Last week in the Lions Commanders recap, you do not win playoff games in the NFL if you lose the turnover battle by an extreme amount. And that's what happened to Washington today. And it's a credit to, Nick Sirianni's philosophy, the coaching of Vic Fangio, of getting these guys to punch the ball out. And that's been a trend we've seen in the NFL that's risen over the last year or so. But to me, that's where you lost the game. You stole 3 possessions from the Commanders, especially the one at the end of the half. In my opinion, that's a killer. That's a killer. That's what? That's a 14. That's a 10 or 14 point swing right there for the Eagles. And none of them are Jaden Daniels' fault either. The one to end the third quarter and start the fourth quarter, in my opinion, probably ended the game for the Commanders, and obviously you had the one early on that set the tone by Eckler. So to me, that's kind of where you see now you have these 3 extra possessions, guys. This game was a 2-possession game at the end of the third quarter. Think about that. It's a 2-possession game. I know the score does not reflect that, but it was a 2-possession game. And if you make 3 turnovers, 3 critical errors, three possessions where you not only score, but you give the other team a short field with an opportunity to go down and score themselves, that's where you lose the game. And to me, that's what happened with the Commanders, right? So obviously those are errors. And again, they're a team that they do not have the players who have been there before. They're a super young team, right? They're a young team. And to me, in that moment, in those moments, those high leverage moments, you saw what happened, that Philadelphia was able to come through and they were able to get through those moments, and Washington just didn't. And Washington was a team that they were out high leveraging other teams in a lot of those moments, even the last 2 games. To go out and win 2 road playoff games in, LA, in a hostile environment in Detroit, not a small accomplishment at all. But today it finally looked like the moment was a little too big for them. We talk about turnovers. We talk about, the other mental mistakes, right? Sanders still, he had the late hit on Saquon out of bounds. And then you have the unsportsmanlike conduct that I know it didn't result in points for the Eagles, but those are the type of things that, they just can't happen. They just can't happen. So again, a team that's experienced, they've been there before. They win over a team that looked like they haven't been there before, and the moment was a little too big. And, as a fan, this is what I expected to happen last week with the Lions versus the Commanders, where, the Lions looked like the more experienced team. But it turned out the Lions were the team that turned the ball over, and that margin was even worse. It was a 5-0 turnover margin, and here it was 3-0. In the playoffs, there are games where it's very difficult to find extreme blowouts in the playoffs, okay? Very difficult. You're either going to have, kind of a shootout like how this game was, or a super defensive game. Okay, or a super defensive game. And in this situation, when you have a game like this where you have 2 offenses, right? You have Jalen Hurts and you have Jaden Daniels, 2 dynamic quarterbacks who can make plays, who can extend the pocket, Jalen Hurts smartly throwing the ball away multiple times. When you have quarterbacks who are able to win those slight margins on every single down, that's when you can have this kind of a showdown. And to me, it just came down to those mental errors and Washington not having enough possessions to be able to keep up with Philly. The other thing I'll say is even Jaden Daniels. You talk about last week against Detroit. What was the one thing we talked about? You have to get pressure on the quarterback. You saw what happened to Jared Goff when you got pressure on him. It's same thing applies to Jaden Daniels. You get pressure on Jaden Daniels early on. A lot of Jaden Daniels' throws in this game were off his back foot. They were off his back foot because Philly was getting an interior push. He couldn't step up in the pocket. And when he couldn't step up in the pocket, you make these throws off, you make him throw off his back foot. Now, sometimes the ball sails a little bit. He's a little off. You saw there was some inconsistency, some points of the game. You were like, that's a throw you've seen Jaden Daniels make all year. And now he doesn't make it. It's because of pressure. It's because of getting to the quarterback. And that's what Philly was able to do early on. I don't have the exact sack numbers, but they're definitely, I remember at least 2 sacks and multiple quarterback hits on Jaden Daniels, and they were chasing him out of the pocket numerous amounts of times. So to me, that was another big thing. And then the final part of this game was the Philadelphia Eagles defense, the way Vic Fangio played his defense. They forced Washington to earn every single yard that they got. And Tom Brady mentioned this on the broadcast about like 500 billion times. But every single play that they had to make, it had to be, it had to be a tough throw by Jaden Daniels. It had to be tough yards by Austin Eckler. They were going to let them, if they needed to, dominate the time of possession and make tough plays, and they forced them into high leverage moments. Like fourth downs, you saw the fourth downs early in the games, and Washington, they were able to convert those fourth downs. They were able to get a fake punt. But as you increase the number of high leverage moments for a young team, the probability that they fail goes up. And that's exactly what happened, and it's a credit to Vic Fangio and the scheme that he was using against Washington. It was not like Detroit where you gave them the ability to shoot for big plays. And yes, I understand the Lions played like that because they just didn't have the talent to be able to do what the Eagles did today, right? They didn't have the talent because of how decimated the defense is. But you look at what Philly did, that's the template of how you have to stop a team like this in a game like this where the way the game starts, this game is going to be an offensive game. It was a great game plan by Philly. They won that part of the game before the game even started. Great preparation by Nick Sirianni and Vic Fangio. But outside of the game, I kind of just want to talk about the season of Washington. I mean, you look back and, step back, take yourself out of the vacuum of the game. What a season by Jaden Daniels. It's genuinely the greatest rookie quarterback season that at least I've ever seen in the history of football. You think about it. I mean, when's the last time a guy came in? Jaden Daniels, he has the record for most total touchdowns by a rookie quarterback in history. He's the only rookie quarterback in NFL history to have 2 road playoff victories. No other person can claim that. For him to come in, to show the composure that he did, to have the trust in the coaching staff, to be able to get him into these spots, that shows that Washington has not only a great young player, but also a great leader for their team. And just, it's sad that the season ended, but, if Jaden Daniels had gotten to the Super Bowl, the story would have gotten crazier. But the fact that he even got to the NFC Championship, the fact that he was able to go on the road and beat a team like, Matthew Stafford, and then go out and beat Jared Goff in Detroit, the fact that he was able to go out and do these things, that just shows the type of person Jaden Daniels is, and that shows the type of person the Commanders have running their team for this. I mean, quarterback, who knows, man? You have him for the next 15, 20, maybe 25 years with the way medicine's going, with the way, the improvements to training, rehab, all that coming together. You don't know. This guy could be here for 15 to 25 years for your team. And that's just, for a Commanders fan, that has to be the best feeling in the world. And I'm super happy for you guys. You've gone through a struggle at the quarterback position for essentially since RG3's rookie year, it seems like. And, even before then, I don't even know when's the last time you guys had, a great QB, So for Washington fans, super happy for you guys. It was a great season, but unfortunately it had to come to the end. Now, one thing I'm interested in seeing is Dan Quinn, obviously great coach, and I think it's practically hilarious that the Dallas Cowboys had Dan Quinn on their staff for 3 years as defensive coordinator and elected to keep Mike McCarthy, out of all people, as head coach and let this guy go to the Commanders. But this is the second time that you've seen Dan Quinn take a team into a deep postseason run. But there's a big caveat here. What's the first time that happened? 2017 or 2018, Pats versus Falcons in the Super Bowl. And who did he have as his offensive coordinator? Kyle Shanahan. Very next year, Kyle Shanahan takes a coaching job, and San Francisco has been a juggernaut ever since then. Will the same thing happen with Cliff Kingsbury? And if Cliff goes out and takes another job, how does Dan Quinn respond? These are questions that Washington needs to think about, over the next, this entire offseason. And how do they avoid the Bengals regression that we saw after, Cincinnati, they beat Mahomes in the playoffs. Joe Burrow, whose second year coming off a torn ACL, comes down, he beats Mahomes in Arrowhead, and then they go on and, they lose a tough Super Bowl to Matthew Stafford. It's a similar situation where, you don't have a second-year quarterback, you have a rookie quarterback. And now you have to try to find a way. You have to try to find a way to be able to replace one of the best offensive minds and make sure that your team is continuing to get better, because the only problem with having a really young team that did this well so early in the progression stage is that now your draft capital is a little bit worse. It's a little bit worse. Your first round pick, it's a little bit worse. So to see how they respond compared to how the Bengals responded, I think that's going to be interesting. And throughout the entire offseason, I'm sure that's a parallel that we're going to be able to draw to make sure that, what happened to Washington, that they don't, kind of dive a little bit. We haven't seen Cincinnati be able to get back there. They missed the playoffs this year. How can Washington prevent that from happening to their team? So, great season by Washington. Jaden Daniels is a star, but their season has ended. And now it's time to talk about the winner of the NFC, the team that will be representing the NFC in the Super Bowl, and it's the Philadelphia Eagles, guys. What a turnaround for this team. They started the year 2-2, and I don't know if you guys remember, it was a long time ago, it feels like now. I mean, it was only a couple months, but there were people who genuinely wanted Nick Sirianni fired. You had Nick Sirianni shushing his own home crowd in Philly. He was shushing his own home crowd. They were 2-2 to start the year. I don't know what happened after that, but something clicked. And something can click like that for only the great teams, for the legendary teams. You saw it happened with Tom Brady. It happens for the great coaches. Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. You remember 2014, I'm pretty sure 2014, that's the year. They start the season, they have a terrible loss to the Chiefs, but like 41-13, and people are thinking, this is the end. They're thinking this is the end. And then Brady goes on, and the Pats go on a roll, and they beat the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, and Brady ends up winning 4 Super Bowls after that. So, to me, this is a situation for Philly where you can look back and say, man, what kind of words of wisdom, what was the discussion in the locker room? How is Nick Sirianni able to turn this around? And, obviously for Nick Sirianni, one of the big things was, two seasons ago when you made the Super Bowl, you had Shane Steichen and you had Jonathan Gannon as your coordinators. And to be able to go out and get Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio this year to replace them, that's absolutely huge. And for Lions fans, right? This is obviously, Lions-centric channel. For Lions fans, this is kind of the template that we need to follow, losing both coordinators. And it was tough for Philly, which is why that, for the Lions, it's not an easy task to be able to replace those two coordinators and just, be at that same level for next year. You have to hope and pray that Dan Campbell is a god at evaluating talent. And he's shown to do that, but let's see. But getting back to Philly's point, for Nick Sirianni to be able to reload, for him to say, I lost 2 of my best guys at calling plays, I'm going to go out and get the 2 best people in the game. And he was able to steal away Kellen Moore from the Chargers because the Chargers hired Jim Harbaugh and he inherited whatever mess that was from Brandon Staley. And you're able to go out and get Vic Fangio. And to me, those two moves are characteristics of a good coach. Being able to find the right people. Being able to find the right people that can get you right back to where you were. To me, that's indicative of Nick Sirianni being a good coach. And 2 Super Bowls in 4 years, guys. I mean, you think about that. That's Shanahan level, right? You hold him to the same level as Shanahan. Then Shanahan's gotten to 2 Super Bowls in this stretch since he's taken over as 49ers coach. He hasn't won them. But Nick Sirianni's in the same boat right now. So let's see how he responds. But in the way we regard Kyle Shanahan, my opinion, Nick Sirianni deserves to be in that same conversation. And taking it a step further, not just the coach, Howie Roseman. I mean, you guys talk about there's some great general managers in the game. We have a great general manager here in Detroit, in Brad Holmes. Howie Roseman the job that he's done over the last 2 years, it has to be applauded. There's been so many moving pieces, so many veteran players for the Eagles. Now, the Eagles were not the mess that the Lions were when, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes took over. They were a team that had won a Super Bowl in 2018, and they were a team that was kind of in a mess because of the whole Carson Wentz situation, and Doug Peterson having issues with the team, with the owner. And now you look back and they inherit some of those they still had good players on their team. But the way Howie Roseman was able to identify young talent, the first Super Bowl that you see he went to, it was kind of consummating the talent that he had from the previous roster and getting across some, veteran players in trades and acquisitions. And now you look over the last 2 years, what has he done? You look at the defensive line, it's been completely reloaded. You had Hassan Reddick, Brandon Graham, who's still on the team, but he's obviously injured. But what do? You go out and draft and you stash more high-level defensive players, and you have the entire Georgia Bulldogs, front seven basically, right? You go out, you get Jordan Davis, right? You go out, you get a Jalen Carter. You have a Nakobe Dean who was pass rushing at a high level this year, and he gets injured. And guess what? You have Nolan Smith right there to go in and step up. So to me, again, that's indicative of Howie Roseman. One of the biggest things in football, you have, as a GM, you have to be able to attack aggressively the high leverage positions. Quarterback, cornerback, pass rusher, offensive line, your tackles. Those are high leverage positions in football. And that's what Howie Roseman went out and did. And he got guys to create another stout Philly defensive line. We've seen Philly have a stout defensive line for what feels like over a decade now. And that's what Howie Roseman, let me look up exactly when Howie Roseman was hired. But again, that to me just shows how great Howie Roseman has been in attacking those high leverage positions. And that's why he's been so successful as Philadelphia's general manager. Okay, it looks like, wow. Okay, interesting. Yeah, he's been with Philly since, the early 2000s practically. Vice President of Football Administration in 2006. I didn't even know that. So yeah, he's overseen all this, this entire overhaul of a team. So big credit there. Not even there in the secondary too, right? In the first iteration, who do you have? You have Slay, you have Bradbury, CJ, GJ, you have Malcolm Jenkins. Those are the stars of your defense. Malcolm Jenkins is gone. Bradbury, he's injured. You have an older Slay who's not the shutdown corner he used to be. You have a CJ, GJ who's, great attitude, but, he definitely plays over the top at times. And now you replace that and you have young players right behind to step in. You have a Cooper DeJean. You have a Quinyon Mitchell. You have a Reed Blankenship who you picked up as an undrafted free agent after the 2022 draft class. That level of foresight and thinking, that's crazy on the defensive side of the ball. And I haven't even addressed the biggest thing that he did. He went out and made a splash in the offseason when everyone else said that the running back position was dead. He goes out and he gets Saquon Barkley, guys. He goes out and he gets Saquon Barkley, and that takes this offense from great to on the verge of unstoppable. You look at the weapons. Hurts is a dynamic quarterback. He's been injured this year, and he's been injured the last couple of years. Since his MVP season, you want to think about why he's taken a step back. He's essentially been playing injured. But now you add to the weapons Hurts has. He has a Goddard. He has a Devonta Smith. He has an A.J. Brown, three of the premier, pass catchers in the game. And you go out and you get Saquon Barkley behind that offensive line, which they lost Jason Kelce, but they still have Jordan Mailata. They still have, Landon Dickerson. They still have Lane Johnson. To that offensive line, when you go out and you add a guy like Saquon Barkley, you saw first play of the game, touchdown, one of the best runs of the year. So Saquon, that acquisition, when pretty much every other team in the NFL was kind of sticking away from the idea of, do we really want to pay a running back that much, a free agent running back who's 27, 28? Do we want to pay a running back his second contract? When no other team was thinking that, he goes out and he takes a chance on Saquon Barkley. And Saquon Barkley, he's, in my opinion, he should win. He should be the MVP of this league. So Howie Roseman, in my opinion, should get a lot of credit as well. And the window for this year, regardless of what happens in the Super Bowl, because you have that, because you don't necessarily have an exigence of all your veteran players, because of that, and because you have young talent filling the pipelines behind, because of what Howie Roseman's done, your window doesn't have to necessarily close after this year. Now, it's obviously still, you never know if you're going to get back here. But to me, this is not a situation like we talked about with the Rams 2 years ago, where that's it. That's your window to go out and win. Because after that, you lose an Aaron Donald, you lose a Jalen Ramsey. And then you're not the same anymore. You're not the same on the defensive side of the ball. So to me, Philly has lengthened their window over the last 2 years, even if the results have not showed that. I'll also say this: Jalen Hurts. I hate that Jalen Hurts I just don't understand. The guy, he makes every throw you need him to in high leverage moments. And he's been doing that ever since his essential rookie year, where he was starting games for Carson Wentz. The leap that he's taken is unbelievable. And yes, he's not playing at the same level as his MVP year. I understand that. But if you're trying to tell me that Jalen Hurts is not a top 10 quarterback in this league, I think that's blasphemous. I think Jalen Hurts, yes, I believe he's in the same category as a Jared Goff, where he's a good enough quarterback to go out and take his team and win the Super Bowl. And he can take over a game at times. And you kind of saw it today with his legs. He was making high leverage throws to A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. 4th and 5, he goes out, throws a perfect pass with guys coming into his face. He's cool as a cucumber. That's Jalen Hurts. So, great performance by Hurts today. And I genuinely think all the Jalen Hurts, all the slander on social media has to stop. It has to stop, because in the high leverage moments, this guy delivers. And he's been doing that since he was in Oklahoma. Since he was at Alabama, for that matter. He responds and he delivers under any kind of pressure. And to me, that's the sign of a championship winning quarterback. So great game by Jalen Hurts, and it'll be interesting to see how Philly does in the Super Bowl. Before we end off the video, I want to have one side note on the tush push. There was very comedic sequence in this game where Philadelphia, they tried snap counting on the tush push. And I forget which linebacker on Washington. He had a great game, by the way, Tulu, right? He jumped over the line 3 times, and then the refs were essentially like, if Washington continues to commit the same penalty, we can award a touchdown to the Eagles. That was insanely hilarious. But if you look on social media, people were saying that tush push needs to be banned. Here's my opinion on it, guys. This is football. In my opinion, the tush push is the purest form of football. It's a bunch of guys shoving each other. Strongest man wins. So there's absolutely no advantage that the offense has over the defense in that play. It's moving the ball a couple yards down, and if you don't think you're good enough to stop it, guys, don't let Philly get into 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 situations. The tush push is the purest form of football. It's how football was meant to be played. If you look at its ancestors of the late 1800s, that's how football was meant to be played. And to me, the notion of getting rid of it because Philly's just too good at the play, it's ridiculous. If you want to be good at it, you go ahead and do it. It's a high percentage play. It's a high percentage play, but it's not because the offense has an inherent disadvantage. It's because it's a 1-yard play. You're telling me that getting a 1-yard play in the most efficient way, in the most optimal way, you're trying to take that away from the game? That's just ridiculous to me. Just because you're not handing the ball off to a running back, in the backfield and making the running back go 5 yards to get a first down rather than getting 1 yard to get a first down, that's ridiculous to me. If you don't like the tush push, don't let the other team get to the point where they can use the tush push. Be better, guys. I don't know. This notion that the tush push is bad for football, I will never understand. I will always be on the side of pure football, and that's just what the tush push is. So, great NFC Championship game. The Eagles end up pulling away to make it look like a blowout at the end. But overall, great game, great season by Jaden Daniels. I look forward to the Eagles being in the Super Bowl and hopefully playing the Bills. Guys, we need to pray to the gods to, help them undo whatever deal Mahomes made with the devil. But until then, I'll be coming out with a Chiefs-Bills recap after the game is over. So until then, I'll see you guys later. Peace.